Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into its weight. Allow your breathing to slow and even out. There is nowhere to hurry tonight, nothing you need to solve or finish. The road we will follow moves at a quieter pace, step by step, one small moment after another. If your mind drifts, that is perfectly fine. The journey will continue gently in the background. When you are ready, we begin. Tonight's story is called The Silk Road Night Courier. The caravanserai courtyard has already grown quiet by the time you step beneath the inner archway. Most of the travelers who arrived before sunset have settled for the night. Their rugs are spread beside the walls, their travel bundles stacked neatly near the doorways of the small stone rooms that circle the courtyard. A few lanterns still hang beneath the arches, casting warm pools across the worn paving stones. The air carries the faint scent of dust, leather, and the evening meal that was prepared earlier in the kitchen near the western wall. You pause for a moment just inside the courtyard, allowing your eyes to adjust to the calm rhythm of the place. In the center of the open square, several camels rest quietly on folded legs, their long necks curved gently toward the ground as they settle into sleep. Now, and then one of them shifts slightly, the leather straps of its harness creaking softly. Near the far wall, a merchant carefully folds a thick woven carpet before placing it beside a wooden chest. Another traveler pulls a wool blanket higher around his shoulders as he settles against a pillar. The long journey of the day has ended for most of the courtyard. But for you, the road belongs to the night. You move slowly across the paving stones toward a low wooden bench set beside the wall. Resting there is the leather satchel you prepared earlier. Its surface is worn smooth from years of travel, the dark leather polished by countless journeys between these distant stations along the Silk Road. You set the lantern down beside it for a moment and loosen the satchel strap. Inside, several letters rest carefully wrapped in a square of thick cloth. Each one carries a wax seal pressed with the mark of a merchant house or trading guild, messages that will travel quietly from one caravanserai to the next. Nothing urgent, nothing hurried, just words making their steady way across the wide lands between distant cities. You lift the cloth gently and check that the letters lie flat. The wax seals remain unbroken. Satisfied, you fold the cloth again and tie the cord that keeps the bundles secure. The satchel closes with a soft pull of the leather strap. The courtyard remains still around you. A lantern flickers slightly in the evening air. Somewhere beyond the wall, the wind moves softly across the desert. Soon the gatekeeper will open the outer gate, and the road will stretch out beneath the night sky. But first, there are a few small preparations to make before the journey begins. The satchel rests securely against the bench once more, its strap neatly fastened. For a moment, you stand quietly beside it, listening to the calm rhythm of the courtyard. A lantern hanging from the arch above you shifts slightly as the evening air moves through the open space. Its flame wavers behind the glass panels, casting soft reflections across the nearby stone wall. This is the lantern you will carry on the road. You reach up and lift it carefully from its hook. The brass handle feels cool against your fingers, and the lantern gives a small, familiar weight as you lower it to the bench beside the satchel. Before any night journey begins, the lantern must be prepared properly. You unfasten the small latch that holds one of the glass panels in place and swing it open. The warm glow of the flame brightens slightly as fresh air enters. Inside, the wick burns steadily, though its tip has grown a little long. From the narrow leather pouch at your belt, you take a small trimming blade. It is a simple tool, nothing more than a thin piece of sharpened metal, but it has traveled many roads with you. Holding the lantern steady with one hand, you gently trim the darkened edge of the wick. The tiny piece of charred thread falls into the metal base below. For a moment, the flame flickers, then steadies again, burning clearer and brighter than before. You close the glass panel and fasten the latch. Next, you turn the lantern slightly and loosen the small cap that seals the oil chamber beneath the burner. From the shelf beside the bench, you pick up a narrow flask of lamp oil kept ready for the couriers who travel after sunset. The oil pours slowly into the lantern's chamber with a quiet, careful sound. Not too much, just enough for the long stretch of road between this caravanserai and the next. When the chamber is filled, you tighten the cap again and wipe away a small drop of oil with the corner of your sleeve. The lantern's light glows steady and warm now. You lift it by the handle and hold it slightly away from you, watching how the flame moves behind the glass as you tilt it gently from side to side. The flame remains calm, protected, exactly as it should be for the journey ahead. Satisfied, you place the lantern back on the bench beside the satchel. The courtyard remains peaceful around you. A camel shifts somewhere behind you, its harness giving a soft creak. One of the travelers near the far wall turns in his blanket and settles again into sleep. Beyond the tall outer walls of the caravanserai, the desert night has already deepened. Soon you will step out onto the open road where the lantern light will fall across sand, stone markers, and the long path stretching toward the next station. But before the gate opens, there is one more simple task to complete: water for the journey. You lift the lantern again and carry it a few steps across the courtyard. The light moves quietly over the worn stone paving as you walk, sliding across the curved edges of the archways and the sleeping shapes of travel bundles resting against the walls. Near the eastern side of the courtyard stands the stone cistern that serves the caravanserai. It rises from the ground like a low circular well, its smooth surface worn pale by years of hands lowering cups and filling flasks before long journeys. A wooden lid rests across the opening to keep dust from settling into the water. You set the lantern on the edge of the cistern and lift the lid carefully. The wood shifts with a soft scrape before you line it gently against the stone. Cool air rises from the opening. The water below reflects the lantern light in slow, quiet ripples. Beside the cistern hangs a small metal cup tied to a length of cord. You take the cord in your hand and lower the cup carefully. The rope slides softly against the stone rim until the cup reaches the surface. For a moment, you wait while it fills. Then you draw it back up again, the cord tightening as the cup lifts through the lantern light. The metal cup is cool against your fingers. You pour the water slowly into the copper flask you carry at your belt. The flask fills with a soft, hollow sound. When it is full, you lower the cup again to return it to the cistern, letting it rest just beneath the surface where the next traveler will find it ready. The wooden lid settles back across the opening with a gentle thud. You wipe a small drop of water from the rim of the flask and tighten its cap before tying the cord securely around your belt. Water for the road. A simple preparation, but an important one. Beyond the courtyard walls, the night desert holds a dryness that stretches for many miles. You lift the lantern again and pause for a moment beside the cistern. The courtyard has grown even quieter now. Most of the lanterns hanging along the walls have burned lower, their light soft and steady beneath the arches. A camel shifts somewhere behind you, its long breath slow and calm as it settles deeper into rest. The merchant who was folding his carpet earlier has now disappeared into one of the small stone rooms along the northern wall. Only the gatekeeper remains awake. You can see him near the outer gate, his tall silhouette standing beside the heavy wooden doors. One hand rests on the long iron bar that holds them closed. He has been watching the courtyard patiently, waiting for the moment when the night courier is ready to leave. You take the satchel from the bench and slide the strap across your shoulder. The leather settles comfortably against your side. Then you lift the lantern once more. Its steady glow falls across the paving stones as you begin walking toward the gate. Outside those doors, the road waits quietly beneath the stars, and the long night journey is about to begin. The gatekeeper waits beside the doors as you approach. He does not ask whether you are ready. He can see that you are. The satchel rests flat against your side. The lantern burns clearly in your hand. The flask at your belt is full. The small preparations of departure have all been completed in their proper order, and now only the road remains. He reaches for the long iron bar that secures the doors. The metal leaves its brackets with a low, familiar sound. He sets it carefully aside, then places both hands against one of the wooden doors and begins to push. The gate opens slowly at first, as though the night itself is being admitted only a little at a time. A narrow gap appears between the doors. Cool air enters the courtyard, carrying the dry scent of open sand, stone, and distance. Your lantern light reaches through the widening space and falls across the pale ground outside. For a moment, you pause at the threshold. Behind you, the caravanserai remains enclosed in warm, sheltered stillness. Lanterns hang beneath the arches. Travelers sleep in the small stone rooms around the courtyard. Camels rest on folded legs. A rolled carpet leans against the wall where a merchant left it before retiring for the night. The sounds within the walls are low and close. Breathing, leather creaking faintly, the occasional shift of cloth or hoof against stone. Ahead of you lies the open desert. Not the whole Silk Road in all its vastness, though it belongs to that larger road. Only one stretch of it tonight, one known distance between the station and the next. One path followed by couriers, merchants, pilgrims, and caravans over many years. One journey measured in markers, wells, ridges, moonlight, and the slow changing of the sky. You step forward. Your sandal leaves the smooth paving stones and touches the packed earth beyond the gate. The surface is firm, pale, and faintly ridged by the many feet and hooves that have passed this way before you. The lantern swings gently as you move onto the road, and the light settles before you in a small circle that will accompany you through the dark. Behind you, the gatekeeper waits until you have gone several paces. Then the heavy wooden doors begin to close. The sheltered glow of the courtyard narrows, thins, and disappears as the doors meet once more. A moment later, the iron bar settles back into place on the other side with a quiet metallic sound. The station is sealed for the night. The lantern in your hand remains the nearest light now, and the road belongs to the calm rhythm of your footsteps as the journey begins. You continue eastward, for a short while the outer wall of the caravanserai travels beside you. The rough stone catches your lantern light in broken patches, revealing worn surfaces, small cracks filled with drifting dust, and the uneven shadows of projecting blocks. The walls still hold some of the day's warmth, though the night air is cooling them now. Then, little by little, the wall falls away behind you. The land opens. The road stretches onward into the dark. The desert at night does not feel empty. It feels spacious. The sky is wide above you, the stars bright and clear in their places. The wind moves lightly over the ground, not enough to trouble the lantern flame within its glass, only enough to carry the faint, dry scent of sand and low desert shrubs that grow close to the earth. Beyond the reach of your lantern, the dunes lie in silver and shadow beneath the moon. The world has quieted, but it has not become lifeless. It has merely settled into slower movements and softer sounds. Your footsteps find their rhythm quickly. Step, lantern sway, step. The satchel rests securely against your side, moving only slightly as you walk. Inside it, the cloth-wrapped letters remain flat and protected, their wax seals intact. Merchant houses, trading guilds, private correspondents, traveling partners, men waiting in market towns for news from cities many days away. Each message continues its own unseen journey through the night with you. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic, only words moving steadily across distance, carried by one careful pair of hands to another. Before long, you come to the first stone marker. It rises a little above your knee beside the road, pale against the darker sand. Wind has drifted a narrow bank of dust against one side, softening the lower edge of the carving. You lower the lantern and crouch beside it. The symbol on its face is simple, an arrow pointing east toward the next station. With the edge of your sleeve, you brush the sand away grain by grain until the lines show more clearly. The arrow emerges in the lantern glow. You place one hand against the base of the marker and test it lightly. It holds firm in the earth. That is enough. The stone stands clear again for any traveler who reaches this point after you. You rise, lift the lantern, and continue walking, leaving the first marker to keep its quiet watch over the road. The road straightens for a while after that. Nothing stands beside it for several minutes except the low breathing shape of the land itself. Your lantern moves in its steady arc, revealing pale earth, scattered stones, the narrow ridges left by old wheels and hooves, then darkness again beyond its reach. The desert does not always offer landmarks at once. Sometimes it offers only distance and the quiet discipline of continuing through it without impatience. Step, lantern sway. Step, the air here still carries a little warmth stored in the ground from the day, though the deeper cool of night has already begun to settle over it. Your sandals lift small traces of dust with each footfall. They rise briefly in the lantern light, then fall back again, barely seen. The satchel rests securely against your side. When you shift your shoulder slightly, the leather answers with the faintest creak, a sound so small it seems to belong to the road rather than to you. To your left, beyond the reach of the lantern, a low ridge of sand stretches beside the path like a sleeping wave. Its curve is visible only where moonlight touches the upper edge. To your right, the ground opens flatter, broken now, and then by thin shrubs no higher than your knee. Their branches catch grains of drifting sand, and when the wind passes through them, they produce a dry, whispering sound, softer than cloth moving against stone. You continue at the same calm pace. There is no need to hurry across a road like this. Haste serves daylight caravans when they race heat and distance. Night belongs to another rhythm, a steadier one, a measured one. The road is not something to conquer before dawn. It is something to accompany for a few careful hours. Ahead, the lantern light finds a patch of smoother stone where the road passes over firmer ground. Your sandals sound slightly different there. Less soft pressure, more of a muted touch against worn rock. The stone holds the memory of countless journeys in its surface. Not obvious marks, not carved names or symbols, only the subtle smoothing that happens when many lives pass the same place over many years. You lower the lantern slightly as you walk. Its light rests more fully on the road now, and you begin to notice how the path has been shaped not only by footsteps, but by maintenance. Someone has cleared larger stones from the center line. Someone has pushed loose rubble toward the edges. Someone at some point cared enough to make this stretch easier for loaded animals and tired feet. The road has not remained passable by chance. It has been tended in small ways just as you cleared the first marker. That thought stays with you for a while. Not one person, never one person, always many. A road is a shared act stretched across years. One traveler straightens what another left laning. One gatekeeper oils hinges. One clerk keeps record. One well is covered again at the end of the night. One courier brushes a carved arrow clean before moving on. The sky above remains open and precise. You glance upward briefly without slowing. The stars do not seem nearer in the desert, only clearer. Their light feels less interrupted here. The emptier the land becomes beneath them, the more quietly they can do their work. Then you lower your gaze again. The road continues. And a little farther on, the ground begins to dip toward the shallow, dry channel ahead. The path dips soon after that into a shallow, dry channel. The change is small, but distinct beneath your feet. The packed road gives way to cooler stones and gathered sand where old water once crossed the land. Most of the year, such channels remain empty, but they leave their shape behind. A low descent, a hollow where wind sounds different, a crossing of smoother stones worn by water long gone. You hold the lantern a little higher and step down carefully. The flame flickers once as the breeze passes through the channel, but the glass protects it well. The stones below reflect the light in small, pale flashes. Some are broad and flat, easy to trust with your weight. Others are rounded and must be crossed more carefully. Your sandals touch one, then another, then the firmer incline on the far side. The earth of the road returns beneath your feet. The hollow falls behind. The wider quiet of the desert opens again around you. For a little while, the road runs along the edge of a low bank of stone. It is not a wall in any built sense, only a natural rise where older rock has pushed close to the surface and held the wind back long enough for the road to remain more clearly defined. The lantern light travels along it as you walk, catching rough mineral textures, pale fractures in the stone, and the occasional darker seam where time has opened a narrow line across the face. In one place, the bank curves inward just enough to form a kind of shallow shelter. Travelers have used it before. That much is easy to see. The ground there has been worn flatter than the surrounding path. A few small stones have been stacked at the edge, not into a marker exactly, more as a low windbreak or a place to set down a cup or lantern for a moment while adjusting a strap or binding a sandal. Nothing formal, nothing lasting, only the sort of improvement that comes from repeated use. You pause there briefly, not to rest, but to let the lantern light move across the space and understand it. The stone at your back keeps the wind off for a moment. The difference is small yet noticeable. The silence feels closer here, more contained. You can hear your own sleeve shift against your cloak when you move your arm. You can hear the flame make that almost inaudible living sound it has when the wick is trimmed properly and the oil is clean. At the base of the rock, a few dry stems have gathered where the wind could not reach them so easily. One has been caught beneath a small stone, and when you lift it free, the stem springs slightly upward, then settles. It is a tiny thing, hardly worth noticing, and yet the road at night is made of such details, not because they are important in themselves, but because the mind walking gently through darkness has room for them. You set the stem aside where it will not catch at a passing foot. Then you lift the lantern and continue. The path bends gradually away from the rock bank after that and returns to open ground. The change is immediate. The wind reaches you again, not strongly, only enough to move across the front of your cloak and cool the side of your face turned toward it. Sand has gathered in narrow ripples where the path broadens, and your sandals pass through them with a soft dragging sound before reaching firmer earth again. Farther ahead, the road narrows between two low rises. The lantern catches small pale fragments scattered along the edge of the track. At first, they look like broken pottery in the dark, but when you crouch and hold the light lower, you see they are thin flakes of stone worn smooth by time and travel. The wheels of old carts, the passing of camels, the shifting of sand, all of it has worked these fragments loose from the larger ground and spread them gradually along the roadside. You do not touch them. You simply look for a moment, then rise again. The road needs no comment to remain itself. It only asks to be observed properly. When you resume walking, your pace settles back into its earlier cadence with almost no effort. Step, lantern sway, step. Behind you, the little wind-shadowed shelter beside the rock slips back into darkness, ready for the next traveler who happens to pass that way, and pause for a few quiet breaths before continuing on. Ahead, the path bends between low sand ridges shaped by the wind. At the edge of one bend stands a wooden guide post. It is weathered pale, a little higher than your waist, and leaning just enough to be noticed by anyone who knows the road well. Sand has gathered around its base. You set the lantern down carefully so the light falls across the wood, then kneel beside it. The grains move easily under your hand as you clear the drift away. When you press gently against the post, it shifts slightly before settling into a more upright position. Near the top, the carved mark catches the lantern glow again. You look at it for a moment. These are the small tasks that keep a road alive. Not grand things, not remarkable things, just one traveler after another noticing what needs doing and leaving the way a little clearer than they found it. A post straightened, a carving brushed clean, a cover settled back over a well, a fire properly extinguished, a marker left visible for whoever comes next. You lift the lantern and go on. The road rises gradually toward a low crest. The climb is gentle, but the sand beneath the top layer of the path grows softer underfoot, and your pace changes with it. Each step sinks a little more before lifting again. The lantern moves slightly lower as your stride adjusts. At the crest, you pause, not from weariness, only to stand for a moment and look upward. The stars are exceptionally sharp tonight. Without the glow of crowded settlements to dull them, they arrange themselves with patient clarity. You find the fixed point of the northern star, steady above the horizon, then let your eyes move outward to the familiar constellations around it. Travelers have trusted these patterns for generations. They do not replace the road, but they steady the mind. They remind you that distance can be measured not only by the ground beneath your feet, but by the slower turning of the sky above. You lower your gaze and continue. The road descends from the rise onto flatter ground. The earth is firmer again. Your footsteps resume their settled cadence. Step, lantern sway, step. After some distance, another sound begins to reach you on the wind. At first, it is so faint you are not certain you heard it at all. Then it comes again, light, irregular, and delicate enough to disappear between one breath and the next. Camel bells. Somewhere ahead along the road, a caravan has stopped for the night. You do not see them yet. There is no firelight on the horizon, no dark cluster of resting bodies, no shape of loaded animals against the dunes. Only the bells sounding now, and then when one camel shifts its head or settles its weight in the sand. The sound travels far across open desert, rising and fading with the movement of the air. You keep walking, and the signs of them begin to appear. First, there are tracks beside the road, broad, rounded camel prints pressed into the earth, the edges still clean enough to show they are not old. Then a dragging line where a tether rope or strap trailed across softer sand. Then, slightly off the road, your lantern catches the ring of stones from a campfire. You step closer. Ash lies pale inside the ring. A thin drift of sand covers part of it, but not enough to hide the care with which the fire was put out. Someone scattered sand across the center before leaving, ensuring no hidden ember remained. Nearby are the shallow impressions of resting animals and the softened hollows where bundles or rolled rugs may have been set down for a short halt. The caravan either moved on or camped farther ahead where the ground opened wider. The bells sound once more in the distance. You stand for a moment beside the fire ring, looking at the simple traces they left behind. The desert records movement clearly when the wind allows it. A stop, a meal, a few moments of work by the fire, a quiet departure. Then only rings of stone, ash, impressions in the sand, and a note of bronze bells drifting back over the dark. You return to the road and continue. The bells sound again, a little clearer this time. Still distant, still softened by the wind, yet near enough now that the imagination begins to place them within the land rather than somewhere beyond it. You do not seek the caravan itself, but the road naturally turns your attention toward where they must be resting. The path rises slightly. When you reach the shallow crest, you lower the lantern and let your eyes adjust to the moonlit distance beyond its glow. At first, there is nothing definite, only layered darkness, the pale sweep of open ground, the low backs of dunes. Then, far ahead and a little off the road, you begin to make out a small interruption in the shape of the land. A darker line. Then another. Then the long, curved outline of resting animals. The caravan is there after all, though farther from the road than you first expected. No fire burns now. Either they have banked it fully or allowed it to die. No voices carry to you. The camp is at that quietest point of night when those who kept the first watch have settled, and those who will wake before dawn are not yet stirring. Only the bells move now, and then when one camel shifts or lifts its head in sleep, you remain on the road. There is no need to go closer. Couriers and caravans share the same routes, but not always the same hours. Their rest need not be disturbed by your passing, and your task requires only that you continue east. Still, the sight of them alters the feeling of the journey slightly. For some time, the road has belonged only to you and the lantern. Now, in the wider darkness, you know others lie within the same night. You walk on. The bells accompany you for a few minutes more, drifting between audibility and silence. At one point, the wind changes just enough to carry another sound with them. A brief wooden tap, perhaps a pull against a pack frame, or a hanging cup moving against a saddle hook. Then that too is gone. The ground beside the road shows fuller signs of their passing now. Hoof marks overlap the camel prints in a few places, which means a mounted guard or scout rode with them. A pressed rectangle in the sand suggests where a wooden crate or chest was set down while the animals were being arranged. There are deeper paired grooves where a heavier load dragged momentarily before being lifted again. In one place, a line of prints leaves the road and returns to it, as though someone walked out to check the edge of the ground before deciding the camp should be made farther off. The desert keeps such decisions for a while. You notice, too, a place where someone has cut a few dry twigs from a roadside shrub. The ends are cleanly broken. The leaves remaining on the branches are sparse and untouched above that, suggesting a careful hand rather than careless stripping. Enough for kindling. No more than needed. You pause beside the shrub and lift one loosened twig from the ground. It is dry and light. When you bend it gently, it snaps with almost no resistance. You place it back down near the roots where the sand will likely cover it before long. Then you continue. The bells grow fainter. The caravan lies farther behind with every step, yet the road feels companioned for a while by their presence. Not crowded, not changed in character, only connected again to the wider pattern of movement that belongs to this route. Merchants with goods, drivers with loaded animals, travelers under blankets, guards who sleep lightly, couriers like you moving between them all, belonging fully to none of those camps, and yet serving the long exchange that joins them. At last, the bells fade altogether. The night closes gently around the road once more, and soon after, as the wind begins to alter the path with drifting sand, the first water marker appears ahead. For a while, the path remains clear and easy. Then, little by little, the wind begins to alter it. Pale drifts of sand gather across the road, softening the line of the track until it is less obvious beneath your feet. This is where the smaller signs begin to matter more. The subtle continuation of packed earth beyond a drift, the shape of the ground, a half-buried marker where your lantern catches the upper edge of stone, a small stack placed earlier by travelers who understood how quickly the desert can change its surface. You move more carefully now, not slowly so much as attentively. The lantern travels over the ground ahead. Sand ripples, firmer patches, a slight depression where many feet still follow the same line despite the drifting surface. Then at last you find a marker whose carving is different from the others. It bears the old symbol for water. You crouch and brush the upper face clear with your sleeve. The carving is worn but still recognizable beneath your fingers. A well lies ahead. Not close enough to see, but near enough that this part of the road is shaped by its presence. Travelers do not place such signs casually. They matter too much. You stand, lift the lantern, and follow the road as it slopes gently downward. The air changes first. It feels a little cooler in the hollow. The sand lies more softly there, the land gathered into a shallow depression where water can be reached more easily below the surface. Then the lantern light finds the edge of pale stone, and the well appears in the center of the hollow, a low ring built from stacked stones, a wooden cover across its mouth, and beside it a simple frame with a pulley and rope darkened by years of use. You step into the clearing around it. The ground bears the record of many pauses. Boot prints overlap in the sand. Camel tracks circle the edges where caravans once let their animals drink. Some marks are fresh, others softened by time, but together they give the place its character. This is not wilderness in the empty sense. It is a known refuge between distances. You set the lantern on the stone rim. Its glow spreads across the well and warms the pale surfaces. The rope hangs quietly from the frame. A smooth stone rests on top of the wooden cover to keep the wind from shifting it. You place your hand on that stone first. It is cool and heavy. You lift it aside and set it near the lantern, then slide the cover back. The lantern light falls into darkness. Far below, the water answers with a trembling reflection. The circle of light shivers on the surface, then steadies. You stand there for a moment, listening to how different the silence feels in the hollow. The wind passes above. The well keeps its own cool stillness. The bucket rests beside the stones. You attach it to the rope and begin to lower it hand over hand. The fibers are rough but strong beneath your fingers, thickened by years of drawing water for passing travelers. Down the bucket goes through darkness until the rope slackens, and a faint hollow sound rises from below. It has touched the water. You lower it a little more so it fills fully. Then you begin to draw it up again. The weight increases gently. The rope slides over your palms in a steady pull. Soon the bucket rim appears once more in the lantern glow, silvered with beads of water. You guide it onto the edge of the well. The water inside moves softly, catching the light in small ripples. You unfasten your flask and fill it. The clear stream makes a small hollow sound in the stillness. When the flask is full, you secure the cap and tie it back at your belt. A little water remains in the bucket. You pour that back into the well, then lower the empty bucket to its resting place and straighten the rope so it hangs neat and ready for the next traveler. Before leaving, you close the well carefully. The cover slides back across the opening. The smooth stone returns to its place at the center. The water is hidden again, protected from drifting sand. Nearby, a flat stone catches your eye, set a little apart from the others and marked with shallow, scratched lines made by earlier travelers. Not messages you pause to read, only signs of passing presence. Someone stood here. Someone drank here. Someone crossed this same distance and moved on. You brush a little sand from its surface so the markings remain visible. Then you lift the lantern and walk back up from the hollow to the road. At the top of the slope, you pause and turn once. The well lies below you in its shallow hollow, already less distinct than it was when you stood beside it. The lantern no longer rests on the stone rim, so the place has given its light back to darkness. Only the moon reaches it now, touching the pale ring of stone and the faint outline of the wooden frame above it. The cover is back in place. The holding stone sits firm. The clearing around it looks calm again, as though no one had stopped there at all. But you know better. Road places always remember, even when they do not show it openly. You stand long enough to let the stillness settle around that thought. Then you turn back to the path and continue eastward. The water has changed the feeling of the journey, not dramatically, not enough to alter the road itself. But there is a slight inward easing that follows any well in the desert once it has been reached and left behind. The flask at your belt carries a fuller weight. The memory of the cool air in the hollow remains with you for a little while. Even the sound of your own steps seems steadier again, as though the body recognizes some small reassurance before the mind gives it words. Step. Lantern sway. Step. The road ahead rises into a stretch of firmer earth where the wind has cleared most of the loose sand aside. In the lantern light, the track looks almost polished in places, not smooth exactly, but pressed into a more continuous surface by years of use. Here and there, broad old wheel marks show themselves again, faint as shadows beneath the newer foot-worn line of the road. You pass a cluster of low shrubs at the edge of the path. One of them has caught a narrow strip of cloth in its branches. It may have torn from a bundle or garment some time ago, or it may have been tied there intentionally as a guide during a sandstorm. The fabric is faded and frayed now, barely more than a pale thread in the moonlight. It stirs once in the wind, then stills again. You do not remove it. It still serves as a sign, and signs on the road are not always meant only for the one who placed them. A little farther on, the road broadens enough that the lantern shows two parallel lines where travelers have favored slightly different footing over time. The left track runs closer to a shallow ridge of sand. The right stays on firmer ground. You follow the right, not out of thought, only habit. The easier line tends to remain easier for a reason. The silence deepens again after the well. No bells now. No wind strong enough to move more than the lightest sand. Only the steady small sounds of travel. Your sandals on the earth, the softened shift of the satchel, the quiet living flame within the lantern. You become aware, after a while, of another scent beneath the dry smell of the desert. It is faint, almost mineral, though not yet the sharper note of salt that will come later. Something in the ground is changing. The night air carries it ahead of the land itself, just as the well was announced by coolness before the stones came into view. You keep walking without trying to name it too soon. The road at night reveals itself best when it is allowed to do so in its own order. Above you, the moon has climbed to a place where its light reaches more fully across the ground beyond the lantern's glow. The dunes look lower now, the spaces between them broader. The whole land seems temporarily simplified into pale surfaces and dark edges. In such light, distance becomes difficult to measure. Things may lie farther off or nearer than they appear. That is why the known road matters. That is why markers matter. That is why habit and attention matter more than appearance. The path continues gently upward, and before long it reaches the old crossing track, faintly visible ahead where another route meets yours beneath the wide midnight sky. It runs northward, faint and softened by wind, once used more often than it is now. You pause only briefly where the two paths intersect. The older route disappears into the dunes and darkness. Your road continues east, and that is the one you take. The air changes again not long after that. A dry mineral scent begins to travel over the land. It is faint at first, then clearer with every step. Soon the ground ahead reflects the moonlight differently. Not the dull softness of sand, not the firm, pale line of road, something flatter, broader, and faintly gleaming across a shallow basin. A salt flat. The road crosses it in a line marked by standing stones. You step carefully onto the crust. The surface is firmer than sand and slightly rough underfoot. Each footfall gives a soft, crisp sound that vanishes quickly into the open air. Step. A faint crunch. Step. Here the moon does most of the work. The plane shines almost silver beneath it. The guiding stones rise one after another from the pale surface, spaced so that as you reach one, the next is already waiting ahead. Your lantern glows warmly beside the cool brightness of the basin, its amber light contrasting gently with the silver blue reflection spread across the ground. You walk to the first marker and pause beside it. A fine dusting of salt has gathered along its top. You brush it away with your sleeve. At the next, you do not stop fully. You only let your fingers rest for a moment on the cool stone as you pass. At the third, you turn briefly and look back across the basin. The line of markers you have followed now fades behind you into pale distance. The salt plain feels larger than the road itself. Dunes rise dark at its edges. The sky above remains full of stars, though the moon gentles some of their sharpness. Sound is sparse here. Even the wind seems to pass differently across the flat, open surface. For a while, the journey narrows to a few simple elements: light, footing, breath, direction. Far ahead, a marker stands slightly taller than the rest. It marks the edge of the basin where the desert resumes. As you move toward it, the salt beneath your feet begins to change. At first, the crust is continuous and firm, pale as bone beneath the moon. Then fine cracks begin to appear across its surface, thin wandering lines that catch the lantern light only when they run at a certain angle. You shorten your steps slightly, not from danger, only from care. Some parts of the basin hold more solidly than others, and habit teaches you to feel the ground as much as to see it. The sound changes too. Earlier, the salt gave a clean, crisp note beneath each footfall. Here, the crust is thinner in places, and the sound softens toward a more muted break before returning to firmness again. Your lantern light moves over the surface, revealing shallow patches where wind has drifted pale dust across the harder crust, making the ground look almost like folded cloth spread flat beneath the sky. The marker ahead grows clearer. It is indeed taller than the others, set at the point where the basin yields back to desert earth. Around its base, the first small tongues of sand have already begun to gather. The two landscapes meet there without any sharp boundary. Salt flat becoming drift, drift becoming track, track becoming road again. You pause at one of the last smaller markers before reaching it. The stone leans only slightly, but enough that the angle catches your eye. When you rest your hand against it, the chill of salt has seeped into the stone itself. You press gently at the base, not to move it fully, only to settle it more securely. The crust around it has loosened a little. A few grains slide and settle. That is enough. It stands better than it did. Then you continue to the final marker. Close up, its surface shows more weathering than the others. This one has seen more transition. Wind from the desert, salt from the basin, the brushing of sleeves and hands from travelers reaching the far side, and perhaps pausing as you do now. You clear the top with one pass of your sleeve. Fine pale dust lifts briefly, then disappears. For a moment you stand there without moving on. Behind you lies the wide silver openness of the salt basin. Ahead, the more familiar texture of sand and earth waits beyond the marker's base. The road has not been difficult here, only different. It has asked for another kind of attention, another kind of footing, another relation between moonlight and lantern. You look back once. The line of markers trails away behind you, growing smaller until they dissolve into the pale openness of the flat. Without them, the crossing would feel immeasurable at night. With them, it has become a sequence. One stone, then another, enough to turn vastness into passage. You turn forward again and step beyond the final marker. The change is immediate beneath your sandals. The salt's brittle firmness gives way to the denser pressed feel of road earth. Sand gathers at the edges once more. The lantern light loses some of its silver reflection and returns to its warmer work of falling across textured ground. The basin remains open behind you, but the road has narrowed back into itself. Low dunes begin to gather on either side. Their presence alters the air. The wind moves differently here, redirected and softened by the shallow rises. The sound of your own steps becomes more intimate again, less exposed, more enclosed between the dunes. You take one slow breath. The mineral smell recedes slightly as the salt flat falls behind. Ahead, the desert resumes its quieter, familiar scents. Dry sand, cool stone, the faint, dusty breath of sparse plants clinging close to the ground. And not far beyond, the small stone shrine stands beside the path. It is no higher than your chest, built from flat desert stones stacked carefully into a narrow column. At its top rests a single smooth rock like a small roof. A strip of faded cloth has been tied around one of the stones. A pale pebble sits at the base. Someone once left a carved bead there too, and it remains weathered but undisturbed. It is the kind of place travelers do not pass carelessly, not because of fear, because of recognition. Journeys are built from thresholds, and places like this mark them quietly. Gratitude for a safe crossing, hope for the next stage, memory of someone who traveled before. One small stone shifted at the base has moved out of place. You kneel, settle it back carefully, then rise and continue without speaking. For some distance after the shrine, the road holds a different feeling. Not solemn exactly, not altered in any visible way. Yet the presence of the little stacked stones remains with you for a while, as certain places do even after they have fallen behind. The mind does not move on at the same pace as the feet. Part of it continues to stand beside the faded cloth and pale pebble for several minutes more, holding the quiet recognition that such small roadside offerings create. The path narrows between two low dunes. Their slopes are smooth and gently curved, the moon resting along their upper edges in a pale band, while the lower sides remain in shadow. The lantern light does not reach far enough to define them fully, but it catches the grains closest to the road, making them look almost like fine metal filings when they slide underfoot. Your pace remains steady. Step. Lantern sway, step. At the narrowest point between the dunes, the road passes a low shape half set into the sand. You slow and lower the lantern. It is the remnant of an old shelter wall, no more than 2 or 3 courses of stone now, the rest long taken by wind and time. Perhaps once it marked a watch point or a small resting nook or the edge of a place where goods were briefly stored above the ground. Now only the base remains, enough to break the wind on one side and create a small triangle of deeper shadow. The stones are cool and dry when you touch them. One has slipped outward a little, not enough to suggest rebuilding, only enough to catch the eye. You nudge it back toward the line of the others with the side of your hand. The wall does not become whole again, nor need it. It simply looks less abandoned, less on the verge of collapse, more like something still faintly participating in the road. You straighten and continue. Behind the ruin, the dunes begin to open apart again. The space between them widens, and the sky seems larger once more. The stars remain clear overhead, but now there is a subtle difference in the air that makes you aware of how far the night has advanced. The warmth held by the earth earlier has almost entirely gone. Coolness has spread more evenly through the sand, the stones, the cloth at your shoulders, the metal of the lantern handle. You shift the lantern from one hand to the other. The brass handle leaves a slight warmth in your palm when you release it, then cools quickly again in the other hand. The body adjusts to travel through such small motions. A shoulder eased, a grip changed, the satchel strap settled more comfortably where it crosses your chest. Ahead, the road shows fresh signs of small creatures again. A fox has crossed here more recently than before. The prints are sharper, the spacing quick and neat. They appear from one side of the road, pause briefly near the center where the paws have pressed a little deeper, then continue toward the darker ground beyond. You stop only long enough to notice that pause. Perhaps it listened. Perhaps it turned its head toward the lantern. Perhaps it simply judged the scent of the road before moving on. The prints vanish into shadow. You keep walking. Some nights on the road feel defined by distance, others by tasks, others by the sky above it. This part of the journey seems shaped by traces: the caravan fire, the roadside cloth, the scratched stone at the well, the shrine, the ruin in the dunes, the fox prints, not events, not encounters. Only signs that this desert route is crossed and recrossed by many small passages of life. The road remains patient beneath them all, and farther ahead, where the fire ring appears later in the night, that patient record of passing will show itself again. There is a broad fire ring farther on, larger than the first one you passed. Several stones form a wide circle where a caravan once rested for longer. Pale ash remains in the center, scattered with a few dark pieces of charcoal. Around the ring, the ground still shows the gentle hollows where camels folded their legs beneath them and where rugs or saddlebags were once laid out. You stand at the edge of it for a moment, then move on. The road does not ask you to stop at every trace, only to notice. The night deepens and then begins, almost imperceptibly, to prepare for change. The air grows colder still. You draw your cloak more closely around your shoulders. The moon now leans lower toward the western side of the desert. The stars remain bright overhead, but those nearest the eastern horizon have begun to lose a little of their strength. You know this hour. It is often the quietest. The middle watch has passed. The day has not yet announced itself. The desert seems to hold its breath before the sky begins to loosen its darkness. Your lantern glows steadily beside you. The satchel remains secure. The road stretches ahead, pale and patient. Now and then you pass older marks in the earth. Cart ruts hardened long ago where heavy wheels once crossed this land when conditions allowed. Faint stake holes from tether posts at a resting place where caravans gathered animals in a rough line. A low stack of guide stones built by many hands over many journeys, one small rock slipped down its side. You set that stone back in place before moving on. The guide stack remains behind you, steadier now by only the smallest measure. Yet even that small measure seems to matter in this hour. The deepest part of night has a way of thinning the mind down to essentials, not emptying it, but quieting whatever is unnecessary. In daylight, a slipped stone might pass unnoticed. Here, under stars and lantern light, its correction feels proportionate to the world around it. The road continues more or less as it would have done regardless. And still, you are glad it stands properly again. The path ahead is broad and level for a time. Its firmness suggests long use. Your sandals meet the ground with a muted, reliable sound. No shifting crust now. No loose bank of gravel. No hollow. Just the steady line of travel running eastward between low reaches of desert that barely rise from the dark. Above that low horizon, the stars begin their slow surrender in the farthest east, though overhead they remain fully themselves. You become aware of the cold more distinctly here. Not harsh cold, desert pre-dawn cold. A dry, clean coolness that gathers in the folds of your cloak and along the exposed skin of your face and hands. The lantern's warmth feels closer in response. Not enough to heat you, only enough to exist as a small companionable contrast in the air. You draw your free hand briefly inside the cloak, then let it fall again. At the edge of the road, a few darker stones sit in a rough row, as though placed there intentionally long ago to mark the safer ground where the track broadens. One has rolled inward, and now lies partly in the path. You move it back with the side of your sandal as you pass. The gesture is almost unconscious. Not a stop, not a task, only an adjustment made within motion. The earth here carries faintly overlapping histories. Beneath the clearer foot-worn line of the present road are older traces, some almost erased. A suggestion of broader turning space where wagons may once have angled across. A shallower outer line where perhaps animals were walked parallel to the main track. A place where the ground dips slightly from many hooves gathering and shifting before moving on. None of it is exact enough to reconstruct, only enough to feel the accumulation. You glance eastward again. The horizon has changed more than it first seemed. There is still no true light, but darkness no longer holds a single quality across the whole sky. The east has loosened. The stars there are weaker. The line between ground and sky is becoming more readable. You continue in that knowledge, not hurrying because dawn is coming, merely aware that the road itself is entering another phase. Night journeys are not all one thing. Early departure has its own texture. Midnight has another, the hour before dawn another still. The same route changes character as the sky turns, and a courier learns to feel those transitions almost as clearly as changes in the ground. Your lantern swings. Its light reaches the road, your cloak hem, the lower rise of the path ahead. Step, lantern sway, step. Somewhere far off, perhaps beyond the visible dunes, a bird gives one brief call and falls silent again. The sound is so slight it might almost be mistaken for a stone shifting. Yet it carries that unmistakable quality of life preparing itself for the edge of morning. You listen for it again. It does not return. The silence after it seems even deeper for a few moments. Then your own footsteps reclaim the road. And little by little, as the eastern horizon continues to pale, the caravanserai ahead begins first as distance, then as shape. The tasks remain varied enough to keep the road human. A marker cleared, a post straightened, a stack repaired, a shrine steadied, a well closed, none of it hurried, none of it dramatic, all of it part of the same long civility of travel. The sky begins to alter at last. At first, the change is so subtle it could be mistaken for imagination. A slight easing of darkness low in the east, the faintest silver gray at the horizon where land and sky meet. The stars closest to that edge dim a little. The moon lowers farther west. Your lantern does not grow less bright, but the world around it begins to show itself more clearly. You look ahead along the road. For a long while, there is only distance. Then, slowly, a shape begins to gather itself on the horizon. Low, dark, horizontal at first, then with enough nearness to suggest form. Walls, another caravanserai, still far away but real now, not merely imagined from habit and expectation. You continue toward it, step, lantern sway, step. The eastern horizon pales further. A wash of gray moves upward through the sky. The stars retreat one by one, beginning with the weakest and the lowest. The road itself becomes easier to follow. What the lantern lit in amber all night is now joined by a softer light that belongs not to flame, but to morning approaching. As the walls grow clearer, so do their details. Long straight lines of stone rising from the desert floor. The dark rectangular mass of the gate. Then, nearer still, two lanterns hanging beside the entrance, their small flames steady against the cool pre-dawn air. Those lamps burn for travelers arriving early and for the men who wake before dawn to open the station to the day. You walk toward them. The ground widens where many feet and hooves have gathered near the entrance over time. Camel prints cover the sand. Hoof marks overlap. The road here is no longer a narrow line of solitary passage, but the shared threshold of arrival. The gatekeeper is already awake. Wrapped in a cloak against the dawn chill, he stands beside the heavy doors. When he sees your lantern approaching along the road, he straightens slightly. Couriers who travel by night are familiar enough that no explanation is required. You stop before the gate. For a moment, you do nothing except stand there with the journey behind you and the station before you. The first marker after departure, the dry channel, the leaning guide post, the distant bells, the extinguished fire ring, the water marker, the well in its hollow, the silver salt plain, the shrine between the dunes, the long, quiet hours beneath the stars. All of it has gathered itself into the road that ends here for now. The gatekeeper lifts the iron bar. The metal leaves its brackets with a low sound. He pushes one door, then the other. The gap opens slowly, revealing the courtyard within. Lamplight and early dawn gray mingle across worn paving stones. Somewhere inside, a stable hand is already moving. An animal shifts its harness with a soft leather creak. A murmur of low voices drifts through the opening. You step forward and pass through the gate. The air changes at once. Shelter replaces open distance. Stone replaces sand. Sound behaves differently here, held and returned by walls and arches. The lantern in your hand now casts a gentler circle than it did outside, one suited to enclosed space rather than the broad silence of the road. Behind you, the gate closes. The heavy doors meet. The station encloses itself around you. Within the courtyard, the day has not yet fully begun, but it is preparing to. A stable hand moves among resting camels, checking straps, and blankets before the first departure of morning. Near one wall, a merchant kneels beside bundled goods, tightening a rope around folded carpets. Another traveler rolls a rug and shakes a thin drift of sand from its edge. Lanterns still hang beneath the arches, but their flames look smaller now beside the pale early light creeping onto the upper stones. You walk across the courtyard to the clerk's room. Inside, a ledger lies open on the desk. The clerk sits beside a lantern of his own, the warm light falling across pages lined with careful writing. He looks up as you enter. Without hurry, you remove the satchel from your shoulder and place it on the desk. The leather feels lighter in your hand now than it did when you first lifted it. You loosen the strap and open it. Inside, the cloth-wrapped bundle lies exactly as you arranged it before leaving the last station. You lift it out and place it before him. He unfolds the cloth, checks the wax seals one by one, and gives a small nod when he finds them intact. Then he takes up his pen and records the arrival in the ledger with the unhurried steadiness of a man accustomed to the long rhythms of this road. The pen moves. The page receives the night's work. The clerk sands the fresh line of ink with practiced ease. From a small dish on the desk, he takes a pinch of fine, drying sand and lets it fall lightly over the new writing. The grains settle across the wet strokes of the pen, dulling their shine for a moment. Then, after a brief pause, he tips the ledger gently, and the extra sand slides off onto a waiting tray, leaving the entry clean and set. You watch the motion without speaking. It belongs to the same world as the road, though it takes place under a roof instead of under stars. The same patience, the same refusal of haste. Out there, a marker is brushed clean grain by grain. In here, ink is given time to dry properly before the page is turned. One task in darkness, another in lamplight, both part of the same long chain by which messages travel. The clerk folds the cloth back around the letters with careful hands. He does not tighten the cord too quickly. He lets the edges align, smooths the fabric once with his palm, then draws the tie secure. Nearby on a shelf lie other bundles waiting their own movement onward. Sealed packets, narrow tablets, a wrapped account book, a wooden tally board set aside with a cord through one corner. Each has arrived by some route. Each will leave by another. For a moment, the room feels smaller than the journey you have just completed and larger than the desk before you. Smaller because it contains only a few practical objects. Ledger, pen, lamp, sand dish, shelf, stool. Larger because this is one of the points where distances meet and are translated into record. Outside, the desert turns travel into marks in sand and shifts in air. Inside, the same travel becomes lines of ink and bundles arranged in order. The clerk looks up briefly and inclines his head, not in ceremony, only acknowledgement. The work was done properly. You answer with the smallest return of that gesture. Then you refasten the satchel. It has indeed become lighter now, though not only in weight. An emptied satchel sits differently on the body even before it is lifted. Its purpose for the night has changed. The strap lies against your shoulder with less insistence. The leather no longer carries the quiet tension of guarded contents. It is simply what remains in your keeping after delivery. When you pick up the lantern from the desk, its reflected light glances across the edge of the ledger and the brass rim of the sand dish. The room smells faintly of oil, dried ink, dust, and the cool stone that has held the night outside. Through the open doorway, you can already see the courtyard lightening by degrees. You step back out beneath the arch. The difference between the room and the courtyard is immediate. Inside, the air had been still and close, warmed a little by the clerk's lamp. Outside, the pre-dawn air moves more freely, carrying the smell of animals, dust, rope, and water from the inner well. The courtyard stones show more of their true color now as the sky lifts. Behind you, the clerk turns a page. You hear the dry, deliberate sound of it. Then the pen begins again. That too will continue after you leave the doorway. More arrivals, more departures, more names, marks, houses, stations, routes. The road outside may look solitary at night, but places like this prove otherwise. Solitude on the path is only one layer of a much larger exchange. You stand there a moment longer with the lantern in hand, not because anything is delayed, only because the movement from road to record deserves its own brief stillness before the journey gives way fully to morning. The first true light of morning is touching the highest edges of the walls now. The eastern sky beyond the gate holds a faint band of pale gold beneath the gray. The lanterns under the arches are still burning, but their authority is ending. The stars have nearly gone. You cross the courtyard slowly. A camel lifts its head and exhales in a long, quiet breath. The stable hand runs a brush along the edge of a saddle blanket. Nearby, a merchant checks the corner knots on a bundle of goods and presses the seal on a travel chest to make sure it is held. A boy carries a bucket from the inner well. Another traveler ties a strip of cloth more securely around a rolled bed cover. Morning does not arrive all at once here. It gathers in tasks. You reach an iron hook beneath an arch and hang your lantern there. The brass handle is warm beneath your fingers. The glass still holds the heat of the long journey. The flame remains steady behind the panels, but its task is finished for now. The road has yielded you back to walls and stone, to clerks and stable hands, and the measured waking of a station at dawn. For a moment, you stand beside the lantern and look across the courtyard. The journey is complete. The letters have been delivered. Beyond the walls, the road lies pale in the growing light, waiting for those who will follow it by day and by night. Somewhere far behind, the well rests beneath its cover in the cool hollow. The guidepost stands straighter. The first marker shows its arrow clearly once more. The shrine remains balanced beside the dunes. The salt flat still reflects the moon sinking westward. All those places continue quietly where you left them. They do not disappear because you have passed through them. They remain, ready for the next traveler who steps out after sunset with a lantern in hand and a known distance before them. Morning spreads a little farther across the stone. Voices grow slightly more distinct in the courtyard. Harness straps are checked. Bundles are lifted. The long life of the Silk Road resumes its daylight rhythm even as the last of the night withdraws from the sky. but your road for this journey has ended. The satchel rests light at your side. The lantern cools slowly on its hook. The open desert is behind you now, transformed into memory not by drama, but by completion. One station to another. One measured stretch of dark crossed with patience. One careful carrying of words through the quiet hours when the world is reduced to breathe, footing, light, and direction. You remain there a little longer beneath the arch, not because anything is left undone, only because the hour invites stillness. The courtyard before dawn is different from the courtyard by full morning. It still holds some of the night within it. The lanterns are not yet extinguished. The shadows remain soft under the arches. The sounds are present but restrained. The place has not fully turned outward to the day. It is balanced, briefly, between the sheltered inwardness of night and the movement that will soon fill it when the sun rises higher. A clerk's pen scratches once more across the ledger inside the room behind you. A stable hand speaks softly to one of the camels. A merchant lifts a bundle and sets it down again to adjust the weight. The small practical sounds of morning gather themselves, one by one. You look toward the gate. Beyond it, the desert road now lies in a clearer light than when you crossed it. The color of the sand is returning. The shapes of the low ridges and hollows are easier to distinguish. What the moon softened and what the lantern isolated, morning now reveals more evenly. Somewhere out there, the dry channel waits in the same shape. The first guide stones still stand in their places. The old crossing road still leads northward into less used ground. The fire rings remain where caravans rested. The road has not changed simply because dawn has come. It has only become visible in a different way. That, too, belongs to the work of a courier. To know a road in darkness and in light. To understand how the same distance alters according to the hour. By day, the route is a line of heat, color, and open horizons. By night, it becomes a quieter sequence of lantern light, stars, scent, texture, and remembered signs. One road, two different ways of knowing it. The sky beyond the courtyard walls grows warmer at the horizon. The pale gold strengthens, gray lifts. A suggestion of rose enters the lower edge of the clouds far away, though overhead the sky is still cool and colorless. The lantern hanging beside you seems smaller now, less central, though its flame remains unchanged. It is the world around it that has altered. A traveler passes behind you carrying a folded blanket over one arm and nods once in greeting. Another man crosses toward the gate with a lead rope in hand, preparing to bring in a camel from the outer enclosure. The station continues waking. Your own work remains complete. This matters, not because the letters were precious in a dramatic way, nor because the journey was dangerous in some tale-telling sense. It matters because completion carries its own quiet satisfaction. A sealed bundle taken up in one courtyard before full night. A road crossed without haste. A satchel set down in another courtyard before sunrise. No delay, no loss, no damaged seal, no careless omission. Only the steady honoring of a task done properly from beginning to end. You let that simple fact settle. Then, at last, you turn from the archway. The inner rooms of the caravanserai wait now. A place to rest, water to wash the dust from your hands, a bench or rolled bedding in a shaded corner. The morning meal that others will prepare as the station comes more fully to life. The long road has narrowed itself to these smaller comforts, and they are enough. You take a few steps across the courtyard, then pause once more and glance back at the lantern on its hook. Its flame still burns. Its glass still carries a faint trace of dust from the road. Its brass frame still reflects the first light of morning in muted lines. Tonight or another night soon, perhaps it will be lifted again by your hand or another's. The wick will be checked, the oil will be topped up, the latch will be fastened. The flame will be tested against movement. A gate will open. A road will begin again. That is the nature of work like this. It returns, it repeats. But in its repetition, there is order rather than dullness, continuity rather than monotony, the long, dependable pulse of movement between one human shelter and another. For now, though, the cycle has reached its resting point. The letters are safe. The road is behind you. The station has received you, and morning has come. The first direct light of the sun touches the highest outer stones. It is only a small brightness at first, a warm line catching the top edge of the wall. Then it spreads a little farther, laying a thin gold along the upper courses of stone. The courtyard floor remains mostly in shadow. The lanterns still burn under the arches. But the day has made its first true mark. You draw one slow breath and let it out. The night journey settles gently in your body as something completed. The measured weight of the satchel at your side, the remembered swing of the lantern, the coolness of the well hollow, the brightness of salt under moonlight, the sound of distant bells moving over sand, the broad stillness before dawn when the caravanserai first appeared against the east. All of it now belongs to the quiet, finished shape of memory. And in that first calm light of morning, within the walls of the station at the end of the road, the long work of the night courier comes to rest.